Welcome to the Super Gamer Podcast. Welcome to the new Super Gamer Podcast, episode 124. Our guest this week on a very hot day, gracious enough to meet me in person at the Forks on a super hot day, and I'm sweating buckets, so sorry. But our guest is a podcaster, a Winnipegger, obviously, meeting in person, which is always nice, a music teacher, an artist, a multi-instrumental musical performer, lover of video games, music and sound designer for games, but host of the Overtone Warp Zone, but also you have edited a few podcasts and been a guest, at least on one, I know. We have Daniel Bergman, Dan Bergman.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Oh man, it's my pleasure, and I was gonna bike and rival you, but I need some air conditioning after this is done.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a train going by, so hopefully it doesn't ruin the sound quality too much.
Yeah.
Something I'm sure you're asked about all the time, so I apologize. Before we get to the Overtone Warp Zone podcast, you held, or potentially hold, we're going to get into this, the Guinness World Record for longest video game marathon playing a fighting game. 57 hours of Super Smash Bros. Brawl. This was done in 2016 at After Dark Lounge in Winnipeg in support of Geekdom House.
Absolutely right. 57 hours straight, no breaks. Almost. It was Smash for Wii U in 2016. And it's not quite as impressive as it sounds because per Guinness rules, they acknowledge that such a feat is not necessarily healthy for a person to do, to play a game for that much time. So they allot you a 10-minute break per hour that you play, and you can accumulate those breaks. And so my strategy was play for 30 hours, sleep for 5, play for 8, sleep for 2, whatever. However it worked out, and then the rest is history. And I still do hold that record, at least last time I checked, which was last week.
Right, okay. So, obviously, as far as the Guinness rules and what they allow, very stringent and very vague is what you've said before.
Right.
Including the one that was so, I heard this on the Interactive Indies podcast.
Right.
One of them was you needed someone, like a gaming professional to watch, which, as you pointed out on that show, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, totally. And, man, I mean, it's you can go one of two routes to do, at least from what I gathered in my communication with Guinness, is you can do one of two routes. You can hire a judge to come out, and you put the bill for flights, for hotels, for whatever. Ends up going to be costing you 5 figures of whatever, right? Or you can follow their package of instructions to set it out. And I've heard that they're very, very strict, and people's attempts have just been done away with because they didn't cross a T or dot an I or whatever along the way. And so, one of them is that I had to have people who were not associated with me, who are professionals, basically 2 witnesses at any given time, who aren't my friends, who can't just say, oh yeah, he totally did it, and vouch for me. And so, this is an effort of close to 40 people who basically volunteered hours and hours of their time to help me do it. So big shout out to them, and to the owners of After Dark. I don't think that place exists anymore, but they were so good. They were open 2 days straight, which they normally don't do, but just so that they could facilitate this thing. It had to be in a public space, so I had to reach out to them for that. And it was tons of fun. I loved it, and frankly, I would do it again if I had the opportunity.
And the reason I say held or hold, and evidently hold, well, first off, while you were doing it, one of the people you're doing it with said, oh, there's this player named Gatsu, he's going for 72 hours, and evidently there was some disqualification for whatever there. But also, in 2019, Justice Ember Jackson, technically, well, I don't know, maybe not technically, but did longer. But I look up the longest video game marathon playing a fighting game right now on Guinness online, and your name is there.
Yeah.
So
what I looked into those, and actually I found, so Gatsu, he's a Melee player, and Smash Bros. Melee player, and I found out about that basically during my record attempt, and I'm oh my word, because I knew what my cutoff time was going to be, and I knew that I heard that he did 72 hours, and my time was going to be 57. I was oh my word. Am I just going to have to scrap this and throw it out the window or whatever? But evidently, it was something about his recording system didn't capture everything or whatever. And though I'm sure, I wasn't there, I don't know, but I'm sure he did the 72 hours according to Guinness rules. It just wasn't documented the way that Guinness was hoping it would be, or per their guidelines, and so just thrown away. And that amount of organization is like so disheartening to try that again. So I don't think he ever did. And then this guy Ember actually reached out to him on Twitter when I found out about that, and he DM'd me a little bit and said that he was disqualified too for more or less the same reason. Just a lack of or whatever, like some glitch in a camera system, or if there's a couple seconds here or there where something's not clear, it's like, well, it could all be thrown out, I presume. So when we did it, we had a setup where we had a tripod of 3 cameras where 2 of them were recording at any given point just in case one failed, and as soon as one got full, we pressed record on the third one, dumped the first one onto a hard drive, so it was ready to go right away. And then once the second one, I always have to go on a rotation of 2 cameras filming at any given time, right? So just in case. So we sent I don't know how many terabytes of data over to Guinness to analyze. And it took them 2 years to verify it. I don't blame them whatsoever, because, that's a lot of stuff to go through. So anyway, it was, like I say, it was phenomenal. And the community thing was so good. Like, we had tournaments pretty much every night of the thing, and so people were coming through and checking it out and all this, and so I wanted to have a component of it where it's not just something for me. It's like we're doing something for a community program, and so there was a youth gamer organization through this thing, Geekdom House, that was starting up, and so we're able to help get some stuff going there. So that was great.
Right, I think it was a program to help teach game dev to youth, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So, yeah, it was great.
Do you think you would have had it in you if, hour 40, 45, if you didn't have that sort of charitable aspect, do you think you would have been able to finish it, or would it have been like, whatever?
You know what, I don't know if this is just me. I'm sure other people have thought about it too, but like growing up and watching the Guinness shows on TV and reading the books and everything, it's like, that'd be so cool to say that you're the best at something. And so it's always been something I've thought about, but like, to put in that much time and effort and more than that, have so many people involved just for something for me, like I don't know that I could do that. So I'm really glad that we were able to support a cause, and I keep thinking about what it would look like to do it again in like a different genre of game, because it's really by genres of games. And interestingly, the long, if I'm not mistaken, the last time I checked, the longest marathon in any genre of video game is like a rhythm or dancing game, like a Just Dance kind of game, like 140 hours. It's insane. Like dancing. Like I was just sitting there holding a controller. That's one thing, but like, anyway, it's incredible. So I'm not gonna get there, but maybe I'll beat another category.
I am not sure if that's still the current record, but I have in fact interviewed the person who once had the DDR record.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I mean, major props to that person. Like I don't know how they did it.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure, you went in, you said with the plan, I'll play for 30 hours, then I'll sleep for a while. Did you end up, is that how it went, or?
Yeah, so I had, like, basically the way that it was organized is I mentioned those witnesses that I had to have, and we had these log sheets for them to go through, and these forms for them to say officially, like, yes, I observed so-and-so, I observed Dan Bergman doing this for this amount of time, I sign it off. But then I also had another type of person helping me called steward. I always had somebody on for that, and they were basically friends of mine who were organizing the witnesses, making sure I had what I needed, including like making sure that I was sleeping or waking me up for when I needed to, facilitating the tournaments and stuff like that, just kind of being my hands and feet when my otherwise hands were glued to a controller for the entire time. So like I say, I could not have done that without those people. So, shout out, you know who you are.
Another, I don't know, not quite a record, but you, as of 2012, presumably for all time, you were officially the second biggest Kirby fan in the world.
Wow. You know what? I will say before we get into that, I listened to a few episodes of the Super Gamer podcast before today, and the hosts are like, man, you've really like done a deep dive and done your research, and I can say the same for you. I don't know that anybody has outside of like a couple of my friends know about that. So props to you for your diligent research. Yeah. Anyway. So that, at the time, Nintendo put out a contest at it was the 20th anniversary, 20th anniversary, something like that. There you go. See, you know better than me. And they said, we've got this like special edition release for, I think it was the Wii, for like this compilation of classic Kirby games to celebrate, kind of like a Super Mario All-Star thing. And they said, okay, so submit your creative love for Kirby in the top 20 people or something like that, voted by whoever, judged by whoever wins a copy of this game. And so I attempted something far beyond my abilities on the guitar at that time, and played a little arrangement of the Green Greens theme or whatever. Or no, it was the Gourmet Race or whatever. One of those Kirby All-Star songs.
I'm embarrassed. I listened to it and I was like, yeah, I know that song. That song. And I like went to look it up and I listened to Gourmet Race. I'm like, I don't know if this is it. And I listened to, I'm sure this isn't the name of it, but it was the Kirby's Dreamland theme. I was like, I think this is it. But
yeah, I know. It's slipping my mind right now, but one of those things anyway. But yeah, so it's all. I'm sure it's still up there. It's all in its 180, 120p glory or whatever it is online, and good times. So I was an official, world lover of Kirby. Beat up I don't know how many people, but there you go.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When you saw that, what did you think?
I wasn't expecting it, but I'm not, I guess, not new to getting sort of free gamer stuff, which is kind of a weird phrase to say, but my mom growing up, she was a stay-at-home mom, and one of her biggest pastimes growing up was just entering random contests that she found in magazines online or whatever. And every single video game console that I've owned, with like a couple of exceptions, out of the 10, 11 that I own or something like that, have all been won through a contest from my mom. And in the future, then I won for myself a Wii U and a Switch, after I matured and grew out of my parents' house or whatever. Then I went on to enter contests, and I got some other free stuff too. So, I'm extremely fortunate to not have had to spend any money basically on a console. I did have to buy an N64 off eBay though. That one I didn't have. So.
I hope you're buying lottery tickets.
yeah, I do. I'm not so lucky with the lottery tickets. Just a Nintendo contest.
So, speaking of growing up, I know musical theater kind of solidified you as a singer and maybe even got you into the track. You ended up taking music in post-secondary. You're now a music teacher. But before that even, like, how did video games get you interested in music at all?
Totally. I mean, so the era that I grew up in was the 90s. And, I think back then, and yeah, I grew up on Nintendo consoles, and certainly back then, the types of games that were coming out, maybe more colorful or quirky than a lot of mainline games today. If you look at at stuff like, Battlefield, Call of Duty, other kinds of games where maybe the music and soundtrack is more atmospheric or whatever, sort of subtle. Back then, soundtracks were more in your face or cartoony or like buoyant, and they had a lot of personality, and I picked up on that. And I'm one of those kids who took piano lessons as a young person, and I think I've always had a pretty decent ear for picking up how to play something. And so I'd try and play these songs on piano and everything, and that really excited me, and especially when the music of the games that I played were able to contribute to the storytelling of the game. I think that's one of the most special parts about music is its ability to, express the inexpressible, so to speak. If there's some things that a soundtrack is able to convey much better than any sentence or book I could put together or whatever. And I think video games have the same potential to express something through this particular medium that isn't otherwise expressible, or at least as easily or in the same way. And I think it's a wonderful thing when games and the soundtracks for those games do that kind of storytelling in tandem, and both do it well. I think that something really wonderful comes out of that, and that's both of those areas have been a passion of mine for ever since I was a kid. So
I have to ask if you had Mario Paint as a kid.
Yes,
because it had that music notation thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent tons of time in there, and you over time, realize like the limitations of those kinds of things. Where it's like, I can't put sharps in, I can't put like double dotted half notes or whatever. But and then of course. In the modern era, you have people who have these hacked versions of Mario Paint where you can do stuff like that and make it all crazy, and I would find stuff like that, like another one of my favorite games as a kid was Super Mario RPG, and I remember there's a part in that game where you have to like compose certain melodies with the
tadpoles,
Todovsky, and you have to use the tadpoles as music notes and whatever, and it's just this little side part of a game, and it's not a major part of the story, but it's there, and you keep coming back to it to unlock more keys or whatever the passes were. But I found myself just playing in that space, right? Like it was a place that I enjoyed, and it's like, wow, it's so the fact that something like that was even thought of to be put in a game, and it's not a major part, it's just a side thing, and it's like, this is just here for fun, so let's have fun with it. I thought that was great.
So as a music teacher, does it help at all, or do you ever get into with students like, hey, anyone want to learn a Nintendo song? Or
Well, I bust out Megalovania on basically every instrument that I can play for them, and they love it. Everybody knows that song. All the kids know that song, it's funny too. Like, there are some songs out there these days that have come back into circulation from those Super Nintendo games from when I was a kid. Like, there's that song from Earthbound that's in that meme where it's all wacky sounding and it's like the demotivational poster or whatever. And there's stuff like that where the kids know these songs. They might not know where they come from, but I'm able to relate to them in this different way that maybe their other teachers don't or whatever. And I try my best to like include my students' voice in the class when we're working on stuff, and inevitably in each class a kid will request that we play a Zelda song or a Mario song or whatever, and it's like I have the wherewithal to help them figure out how to play those things, and it's great to make an extra connection with them that way.
I kind of like the idea of a music teacher, like, I'm sure you don't get mad, don't get me wrong, but I like the idea of, like, someone getting the wrong note, and you're like, that's not how Zelda goes.
yeah, totally, yeah. Oh, man. If you don't get that lullaby right, so help me.
I believe, so a former guest, I know I asked what musical would make a great game. I could be remembering, pardon me, but I don't believe I asked what game would make a great musical, so I will ask you.
What a great question. Oh, my word. That is a wonderful question. I mean, my mind goes to games that have great soundtracks already, or that feature music, like prominently in it. Like, I don't know, Banjo-Kazooie or Conker's Bad Fur Day, that has like some
right.
musical numbers in it too, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Or just like, you could come up with some pretty. I'm thinking too of, like, for instance, there's maybe this is kind of cheating a little bit, but like there's sections in, for instance, Final Fantasy VI where there's like an opera scene, and it's like, well, why don't you make the whole game an opera? You could expand on that, and games like those are epics. They tell this grand sweeping story, and that was the intent of operas as well, to tell this giant thing, this mythological story, and I would love to see a Final Fantasy musical. Why not?
Did you sing the national anthem at a Moose game?
Yes. I
should tell people outside of Manitoba. The Manitoba Moose are an AHL hockey team.
Right. Yes. But it is the same rink where our NHL team plays, so that's kind of fun to stand in that bowl and do that. So, a few years ago, they started to, like, I think it was when somewhere around like when the Jets came back or whatever, they're looking for people to fill out a roster of folks to start these games off, and I was like, well, may as well give it a shot. It's a cool opportunity, and I did that like for a couple years, for like maybe half a dozen times each year, and it really is a neat experience to do that. Now I found myself, I think the very last time that I did it, and I hope this is just a coincidence, it was before COVID, so we'll assume that's part of the reason, but definitely butchered the words in the very last time I did the Star Spangled Banner. So I sang the same phrase like 2 or 3 times in a row. But hey, who's paying attention to that?
Right.
Anyway, good times though. Like tons of fun and really unique opportunity and experience. So
for I'll get your perspective, but for my money, don't get me wrong. I mean, we're both Canadian. Oh, Canada to me though. Not a great song. Star Spangled Banner, fantastic.
Well, that's interesting because Star Spangled Banner, like the range on that song is not meant for like the average Joe. It's like if you're getting technical, it's like a 12th, an octave and a fifth, and that's huge. Whenever you have to start like right in the right range, or else you're going to be voice cracking on the high notes because it goes crazy high. Canada, yeah, it's not as flashy, but I think it's more built for communal singing.
Your average soldier to sing it if he needs on the battlefield.
Or your average, hockey attendee or
right,
whatever.
Fair
right?
enough. Probably a better way.
So, anyway, I both are fun, and a nice side benefit to the fact that I got to be involved in that is that I got to bring some school groups out to do the Canadian anthem, and that was their whole plan from the beginning, was to have student groups come in to do the Canadian anthem and then have some people do the American after them. So, yeah, I mean, that would have been I just thinking about myself as a kid, to go in as a 10 or 11-year-old to sing in a place like that, that would be a super unique and really cool experience. So, I don't know, I'm glad I was able to provide that for some of my students.
So I mentioned at the beginning you were not new to the podcasting world. You were a host on Games Explained on YouTube. Which had tons of traction. What happened to that? You guys haven't done an episode forever.
It's true. The last episode that we did was around. I'll just wait for the train to go a little bit.
This is brutal.
Yeah. It's died down a little bit. I'll go for it. What was the question again?
What happened to Games
Explained? So we initially took a break at the beginning of. The brakes come on again. Nah, whatever. I'll just go for it.
Sure.
Yeah. So, 2 years ago or whatever, in the beginning of 2020, I think is when our last video came out, and that coincides with a big event that would cause a lot of people to stop doing stuff. And so we just, there's been times where it's been maybe we can get together, and it just hasn't worked out. And our schedules are just getting more and more, taken over by the demands of life. And each of us have had a kid since 2 years ago, to each of the members of the group. And so, extra responsibilities, man. You think you don't have any free time as an adult without a baby, man. And then you get the baby, it's it's so hard to schedule things. So. Games Explained is definitely not over. We're still going to be working on projects probably soon, maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed. So, yeah.
And for listeners, Games Explained, check it out on YouTube. From what I saw, it seems to be mostly board games, if not all. And basically, they explain how to play them. And, really succinctly, I see, tons of viewers, tons of comments that are like, wow, this does a way better job than the rules ever did. So if you're wondering how to play an obscure board game, check them out.
It's tons of fun. And so Matt Welk and my brother Ben Bergman were the two who started that initially.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Matt Welk and Ben Bergman were the two that started that out initially. It's mostly the three of us that work on it. Sometimes we have some other people join us, but the philosophy there, I guess, is like we had, when we go on YouTube and try and find an explanation of a board game, at least at the time, I think it started around 2015, we would search up something and it would be like a 30-minute video on how to play, like, I don't know, let's say Sequence, the board game, and it's like, it's the rules explained but not in full, and there's some overemphasis on some parts and underemphasis on others, and it's like some review in this guy's like life history and then him playing with his friends or whatever, and there was nothing that was, when you're there in the moment. Like our purpose is for the people who are there in the moment, who've got their friends over, maybe they're the kind of friends who are a little impatient for learning how to play a game, and they don't want somebody like fumbling around and taking half an hour to explain the game even before the setup starts, right? And so our mantra,
like a recipe online.
Back when I was 3, I had my first lasagna, and 5 pages later, anyway. Our mantra is, the rules in their entirety as succinctly as possible. And that's it. We've got, probably like 40 or 50 videos at this point on different board games, and it's great. Board games are another thing in the last 10 or so years that have really become a big part of my life, and so this is a great outlet. We like making stuff, and this is a fun thing to make, so it's great. Yeah.
Before I get fully into the game jam part, which I know you've made a lot of music and sound for, still with the podcast, so obviously that's a world you've immersed yourself in. You were the editor for Daniel Voth's, friend of the show, Interactive Indies, as I said before. Mm-hmm. But I believe you were also you did music and editing for Upfront, the Nurse Practitioners podcast.
Uh-huh.
Which, how'd you even get in on that?
Well, I had a really good contact who was the host of the show, who also happens to be my wife. So there you go. That was the end for that. For a while there, I was helping Dan Voth out, and that was tons of fun. And I like to try and take opportunities when they come and when I'm able to, and I think it always helps to not just sharpen my own skills as I work on these slightly different projects and have to learn slightly different skills from each other, but also the networking aspect and getting in touch with new people it's been great, and I've really grown from those experiences and really had a lot of fun working with those people. And it like I say, it helps when the host is under the same roof as you. You can figure out the logistics of the podcast a lot better that way.
Game jams. I know you've done a lot of work with Matt Welk, who we mentioned earlier. But in particular, I want to ask you about a song you wrote, recorded, produced, mixed, and mastered in one weekend for a game jam, Adrift in the Dark of Night.
My magnum opus. Yeah. And a lot of credit to Matt on that one, because he, the style of this game is all the title, Lucid Drifting Neon Nights.
Sounds like a Ninja Turtles song.
Yeah, totally. and so like the game itself is this, everything's dark, but all the polygons have these bright neon lines, and it's meant to be kind of a callback to the 80s, and so I wrote I figured out in that weekend, like 90% of what all creatives do, as far as I'm concerned, is YouTube things and search up how to actually do stuff. So
I can vouch for that.
yeah, totally. And so I spent the first part of that weekend just looking up tutorials on how to make like good synthwave music. And so then I implemented to the best of my abilities those skills and came out with a song after a day and a half. And Matt's like, yeah, you should throw some vocals on there and make it like a theme song for the credits or something like that. And I'm like, okay, may as well give it a shot. And so we brainstormed like some words that would be like about the 80s or about cars or about noble virtues and mythological creatures. And so we came up with those words, and then I kind of threw them in a word salad and put words together that combine them, like chivalry, pistons, sphinx, I don't know, all these random words, and threw them together and made this gigantic cliche of a song, and tons of fun, and I got to scream really high, so it was great.
What sound booth did you use?
Sound booth, like where did I record?
Yeah.
Funny enough, in my car, close to a train track, off of the Exchange District. Thankfully, no trains are going by at the time.
That's good.
But I just had like a Zoom mic and was out there because there was no place to record. We were doing the game jam in person. I screamed some pretty high notes in there, and I didn't want to distract the room.
Trust me. So whenever I can't find an interview, like I do a weekly show, and I don't want to miss a week. So if interviews don't work out or whatever, I'll make a parody song about a video game.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, for the past while, I usually record it like on the day of, which I'm at work. So then my lunch hour, I'm like, well, all right, I'll go drive to the highway, I guess, and just in my car scream into my phone. Yeah.
I heard the Loop Hero one. That was pretty good. I liked it.
Yeah. I think you can tell that some of them have become very last minute.
Well, I mean, props to you for the ethic for getting the episodes out every week, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's dedication.
All right, so I asked you on, I said we would talk about Overtone Warp Zone. I've spent half an hour not doing that.
Oh, well, these are great discussions. I love it.
But Overtone Warp Zone is your podcast. You would deep dive on video game music every episode. You have a particular love for Nintendo, but you deep dive in to kind of explain music theory in the context of whatever song you're doing that day or theme of. Yeah, look, tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, so I was really heavily inspired by Kenley Christopherson. I don't know if you know him at all, but he's a local composer / teacher as well. And in like 2006 or something like that, he had a podcast called Into the Score. So that's like the Wild West days of podcasts, right? Like that's a long time ago. He was in on the ground floor, and he had a pretty good run of a few dozen episodes where each episode he would talk about like a video game, and typically he would talk about a concept in that game that he enjoyed, or a concept that like permeated the soundtrack or whatever. And that idea just really struck me, and I was inspired by other sources too. Like 8-Bit Music Theory is a great YouTube channel that does game music analysis and everything. And so in wanting to do something that was sort of new, as soon as I start to look into this niche, as I'm sure with many niches, you come to realize like how much there is in that particular market or whatever. And I found that there's a lot of people talking about this. And so Smash Bros, of course, as we've talked about already, is a game that's near and dear to my heart. And so I thought to myself, like there's like hundreds of songs in this game, lots of depth to go into. So let's take this soundtrack and pick it apart and see what works about the songs in there. And so each episode, I take a song from the game, and each song comes from one of the characters' franchises that's represented in the game. And so I talk a little bit about the context of where that song shows up in that game or in that series, and then I bring the listener's attention to whatever idea it is. Thinking of some examples here, like a particular scale, like the Lydian mode, or like a particular instrument. Like one episode was on Japanese cultural instruments and stuff like this. And so I bring their attention to that and talk about how it's used to a particular effect in the song. So yeah, and my hope with that is to kind of draw in people who both enjoy video games but also enjoy music, and hopefully, am interesting enough to both sides that they stick around and listen and learn something and hopefully appreciate more about these things that they enjoy.
Is it more of a like you're trying to teach me about music theory, or you're trying to show me these awesome gaming songs?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, and in some ways, like I have a bit of an identity crisis with this podcast in some ways, because I am trying to hit, as many types of audiences, I suppose, as I can. And so, I have friends who talk to me who are video game people who maybe know little to nothing about music, and I have friends who talk to me about it who are music people who know little to nothing about the video games involved, and I try as much as I can to appeal to both in my episodes, or some combination of those two, which is sometimes a hard balance to strike, like especially in the heavier topics of music theory where we're going over like, well, the third of this chord is the same as the 7 of this chord, and yada yada yada. Not a lot of visuals to help you out because it's an audio medium, and so like I'm sure I lose a lot of people that way. So whenever I have an episode like that, I try and have the next one be a more conceptual kind of episode where it's more qualitative than quantitative, I suppose you could say. So yeah, I hope I didn't veer too far from your question there in my answer.
I do wonder though, like, you've got a few dozen episodes out already, and speaking as someone who also has quite a few, like, how much content is there in music theory? Like, are you getting to a point at all where it's like, well, how many times can I talk about the Lydian mode?
Right. Yeah. That's a great question. So, I mean, like, for me, basically what I've done and I'm continuing to do to some extent is, when I have some time to listen to music, I'll throw on the Smash Bros. Soundtrack, and I will, just let it play on shuffle. And when I hear a song that catches my attention for whatever reason, I'll try and pick out what that thing is that's catching my attention. Sometimes I'm familiar with the concept, sometimes I'm not totally sure, but I, have a spreadsheet somewhere where I type in, this is the name of the song, this is what I'm planning on doing with it. And then in the future, when it's coming time to make an episode, I consult my list. I see, what would be a good idea, or what's an area, broadly speaking, that I haven't touched on in a while, and I start to make something on that. And at the end of the day, I could, find something for a lot of these songs in the soundtrack. But it also comes to a time where it's like, we're coming up to song 400. We're getting to like, not the most exciting songs or not the most exciting topics or whatever. So I'm not going to cover like everything, and there will be an end to this pretty soon. But I mean, for now, I've managed to I think keep it fresh enough that there's different enough concepts each week, and week. It's not quite as consistent as that, but each episode, and it is a big part of it too. I should say is just the love of that song in particular. But I always try and draw people's attention to what is it about this song that makes it great. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right, people should totally check out the Overtone Warp Zone podcast. Where else can they find Dan Bergman? You can find me, I mean, mostly I'm with Overtone Warp Zone. The SEO for that is pretty good. Nobody else uses those two words together, so that's great. On Twitter and Instagram, I keep people updated on what I'm doing. On my YouTube channel, I have different kinds of content that I do randomly, covers of things or random, gamer videos or whatever. And so those are some places you can find me online too. Reminds me of you. I love your MIDI artwork.
Oh yeah.
Where you spelled your name and made a song out of it. It's so good.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's. I've seen a lot of big, broad, like tapestries of paintings that people have made with MIDI, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just try this out. And I came out with like a little 30-second like Baroque harpsichord spelling of my name. So there you go. You can check that out on my YouTube channel. Then.
Dan Bergman, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.